a lot of times it starts with, I've got this dilemma about capital gains because there's been significant appreciation or it's been held for so long. And so a lot of times it starts off as a problem. How can we solve this problem of capital gains and the implications of that tax? I think one of the things that probably is scary about the industry is is it just a mutual fund? Is it just paper? Is it something like that? Or is it a physical property? The sponsors are really transparent about the actual business financials. They disclose everything, but they'll actually host a client to go look at that property and walk the ground and talk to the folks running it and have an interactive relationship with them. When you talk to folks who are in family offices and bigger equity positions, right? A lot of times it's about being patient. It's not about looking at the market for the next 6 months or even for a year. In fact, you could say the advantage of illiquidity is that you have the potential to tunnel through whatever the next turn on the corner is, because nobody can project all the way out 5 years, right? A DST built right is going to do what it's going to do through that period of time. And let that capital do the work it needs to do.
Welcome to the Landowner Insider, the podcast for Texas landowners who want to stay up to date with current events shaping our state. Here we talk about issues that actually impact your Texas lands, markets, water, wildlife, policy, and the decisions that are shaping our state. I'm your host, Casey Mock with the Mock Ranches Group. And in each episode, we sit down with the people who are shaping the future of Texas. We're not afraid to ask the hard questions. This is the Landowner Insider Podcast, presented by the Mock Ranches Group.
Jeff Smitherman, Trusted Capital Partners, Marine Corps veteran. Welcome to Stephenville, Texas, to the Mock Ranches World Headquarters.
Thanks, man. It's a great place to be on a beautiful spring-like morning in February.
Yes.
And it's all goodness, right? Thanks for having me.
February is starting to feel too much like spring already.
I'm sure there's a freeze left.
Yeah.
Just going to wait until we get a little more green.
This morning, I've been on the road a bunch. This is our busy time of year, and we've been super blessed with some clients working big transactions all over the state. So I've been driving a lot, and it's interfered with my gym time in the morning that I've tried to do, put the man together so that I want the man put together so when my son's 25 years old,
he can't take you.
Chiseled, and he wants to go hunt elk in the mountains, I can still go, because that's our favorite thing to do. So this morning, Taylor got here at 6 o'clock. It's still dark outside. And I hadn't worked out yet this morning. I didn't get it yesterday because I left my house at 4 a.m. and got home at 10. So what'd I do this morning, Taylor? Went on a run. It was cold outside.
Man. It's good.
It was cold outside.
It's good. It's good training.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Tell me about the Marine Corps a little bit. I didn't know that about you. But we were talking about our good mutual friend, Seth Kraft,
right.
M4 Ranch Group in Colorado.
A good fellow.
Yes, sir. Great man.
Yeah.
One of my favorite guys.
When I first came into the space, he was one of the very first fellows I met at an RLI national conference. And so we immediately made that Marine Corps connection. I was in the Marine Corps for 30 years, actually.
Wow.
So this is a second chapter for me. I grew up in East Texas, went to A&M, on an ag degree, thought I'd come back to the farm, and never quite made it there. Always came back. We still have the farm, and my mom's still out there in East Texas, but
Where all the Marine Corps take you?
All the garden spots, Mogadishu, Somalia, Iraq, Afghanistan. So good.
That's why you're wearing a
good
tan
deployment
shirt.
in the Med. Yeah,
you're
that's
actually
right.
wearing camouflage right now.
I do try to blend.
Yes, sir. So would that have been like Desert Storm era?
So no, actually I commissioned just after Desert Storm.
Okay.
But I went to Mogadishu right after that with the 24th MEU. So it was after the Rangers had had their big fight. We conducted the withdrawal of U.S. forces. So we did like an amphibious withdrawal.
Okay.
And then did a little bit of a med float. I went to Iraq in 2008. Spent 13 months there. I was working on a staff, working on a project that was pretty interesting at the time. And then in Afghanistan, I took a battalion of Marines. I was a battalion commander for an artillery battalion. It was composite. It was rocket and cannon batteries.
During the Afghan War?
During the Afghan War, 2010.
Yeah.
Yep, 10 and 11. So
my son is 11 years old, about to turn 12. He's a great kid. I'm really blessed. He loves the Lord, most importantly. He loves his mom. And he most of the time listens to his mom and I.
Yeah,
most of the time.
Good.
But every day he plays military
Yeah.
And reads war books, reads military books, studies it. And so Seth last year at RLI, Seth goes up to him and says, Maddox, you want to go in the military? Maddox says, yes, sir. Seth said, all right, the only one you're going into is the Marine Corps.
That's it, right?
Yeah. And then, but my buddies that were in the Army, and I've got some real good friends that were Rangers, they all said, Maddox, go to the Air Force. That's the easy path.
And that's why they're in the Army, and the Marine Corps is the Marine Corps. Yeah. No, I'll get in trouble for that, right? My dad was an Army veteran. So
yes,
I grew up as an Army brat. Had older brother, went into the Marine Corps, had another brother who went into the Navy, and they all looked at me as the baby, and they're like, you going in the Air Force? I'm like, I can't come home if I do that.
That's funny. Skylar said when he went into Ala Maria, they're living in the sand with sand fleas and trying to make bunkers out of sandbags, and they need their Air Force guy to come in and think. Yeah. And they said, we had to get him a place to live with the washer, dryer, and an air conditioner before he could come. So Maddox heard that story, and Maddox goes, Dad, I think I like the Air Force.
Yeah, well, we all play our roles, right? And we give them a hard time. That's part of the good fraternity, right?
It is, yes, sir.
Everybody a hard time, but we all do our part.
It is, yes, sir.
Yeah.
So you got a nonprofit. Tell me about your nonprofit.
So I'm on the board of Patrol Base Abate. It's an interesting sounding name, but Sergeant Matt Abate was a Navy Cross recipient who was killed in Afghanistan. Okay. So he's the namesake for the organization that's really unique in that it provides a community for all veterans. It was formed by a Marine who worked for me at the Naval Academy when I was the senior Marine there. He's an infantry officer, was a platoon commander, lost several Marines during that deployment. Matt was attached to him. He kind of referred to him as the modern day Achilles. And he was a really, truly special man. But the veteran nonprofit is to provide community for every single veteran, regardless of whether they ever deployed, whether they were wounded. So sometimes there's that requirement to participate in premier programs. This is a program for every single veteran to have community while they transition. So we've got local chapters in the nation, really have interest groups that meet online. So there's a low barrier to entry to get folks to come and participate. And then we have what we call the Patrol Base in Thompson Falls, Montana. It's an old boys home, about 60 acres, got a bunkhouse. It's tied into 250,000 acres, the Lolo National Forest.
Public land access.
Man, it is a sweet, sweet place. And so we have a 5-day program that we try to get as many of those veterans there to come and participate and what is their interest. But really, that's just the means to get them there to have conversations about community and looking forward, kind of reframing their proposition and not being fixated in the little rearview mirror, but the bigger screen in front of you.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love everything about that. We'll put a link to that. Say the name again.
It's Patrol Base Abate.
Has he got a website?
Yep. Okay. Spelled A-B-B-A-T-E. So it's pbabate.org.
Got it. We'll put a link to that in the notes, in the description, in the notes of the podcast. So, and then you and I will talk offline. We have a nonprofit also called Mock Ranches Gives. It's a 501c3 that several of our agents sit on the board for. We give individually, tithe individually, but I think a business ought to be very benevolent also. So we get a lot of questions about, just in a small town, every sports team hits you up to sponsor their team. And then there's the livestock show and the rodeo and the Lions Club and all the things, And so what we did is we want to give faithfully, we want to give strategically. Sure. And be good stewards of that.
Absolutely.
So we created a 501c3. My wife and I and some of our agents run that. And what we do when we get in, we meet an organization like yourself. We'll sit down, have our board vote and say, is this one that we want to support? If so, to what level? And as we get in requests, just during every week, you get a request. We'll go run those too and say, all right, guys, is this something we want to support? And the way we fund it, we put on 3 or 4 fundraisers a year here in town. I'll get you an invite.
Yeah, thank you.
We do Kentucky Derby Party. This year's Derby Day, May 3rd, always first Saturday in May. Yeah, it's a big time. It's the best party of the year in town. And that'll be at our house. We set up tents and TVs, and it's got all kinds of ways to donate money.
Yeah,
let's say.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so the Derby Party's great. We do a fishing tournament down on the Texas coast every year. This last year, we were able to raise almost $200,000 for the flood relief on the Guadalupe River.
Yeah.
And then we spent not all through that, but we spent a lot of money here at the local livestock show and Erath County. But then we do ministry support, kid stuff. But the way it's funded outside of those couple of fundraisers is every time we close a transaction. So if anybody listen on this, one of our clients, here's where your money goes. Yeah. Every time we close a transaction, our agents have the opportunity to donate money to the fund.
Yep.
And then my wife and I will match, personally, we will match whatever the agent donates.
I think we could call it first fruits plus.
Yes. Right? Yeah. You could do that.
Yeah.
So whatever the agent donates, my wife and I will match. And then that is that agent's bucket of money to give out of the nonprofit.
That's special, man.
So if they run into, and the good thing about a 501c3 is you can use that as benevolence money too. If you find a person in need, you can bless that person. Yeah. We used to run it, and you'll understand what a donor advised fund is in your business. Absolutely. We used to run a donor advised fund, and that was great. But the donor advised fund, you could not spend out of it for operations. Right. You couldn't put on an event or put on a fundraiser and have
has to be to another nonprofit. Right?
Yes, sir.
Or 501c3.
And if we found a family whose house burned down, a client, which we've had, a client whose home burned down, or a client whose child contracted cancer and they had abundant medical bills and we wanted to bless them, we couldn't do that.
Yep.
And so we'd had the funds sitting there, but we couldn't use them for that purpose. And I didn't want to go take the funds from there and funnel them through another nonprofit that would take 30% off the top for administrative, because ours is 100% pass through.
Yeah.
So we just created a 501c3.
That's great, right?
Yep.
So I get an opportunity to kind of have those conversations sometimes with clients, because the distributions that come off of DSTs actually, sometimes it's just cash flow that they were not expecting, or it's more than what they need. And it's just an opportunity to talk about philanthropy, right? Like,
Amen to that.
How do you give? How do you use what's evergreen in terms of just regular, predictable cash flow, that comes from the monthly distributions? And the securities disclaimer is not guaranteed, but predicted because it's an established amount. And then how to take what is that corpus, the capital itself, and what's that going to be, a legacy to your family, or is it going to be used for giving? So that's probably one of the cooler things I get to do, is just help people with that conversation to frame ideas.
I've actually never thought about the DST in that legacy component there.
Yeah.
Because we think about ranches as a legacy asset. Right. The ranch, they do produce some cash flow. Historically, they might have produced a lot of cash flow, but today they produce some cash flow, whether it's through agriculture, farming, hunting, ecotourism, recreation, photo safaris, VRBOs, Airbnbs, whatever the ranch might produce, some cash flow. But really and truly, most of our clients purchase a ranch as a legacy asset.
Yep.
At some point, it does add to their net worth, because they do appreciate in Texas. They've been appreciating 5% per year, let's say. Some much more rapidly than that, but
that's right.
5% per year over time, long term. So there is a depreciable asset. An appreciable asset there for you. But we're thinking about the legacy being in the land. And so for a family that is looking to wrap up their land holding years, maybe they've held land holdings for a generation or multiple generations, and that season has unfortunately run its course. They come to us because what we do is help families through that generational turnover of land, whether they're entering into that as a new goal or they're exiting that. In exiting that season, that legacy can continue by setting up that fund through their DSTs. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and a lot of times it starts with, I've got this dilemma about capital gains because there's been significant appreciation, or it's been held for so long. And so a lot of times it starts off as a problem. How can we solve this problem of capital gains and the implications of that tax? What makes a DST interesting, and why you and I have this conversation, is because it qualifies for 1031 like-kind tax treatment. So it's a like-kind property, but it can do many different things. So one of those.
Let's tee that up real quick.
Sure.
So I've got a piece of land that's worth $2 million.
Sure.
I inherited it from my grandparents at a $200,000 valuation. Okay. Now I've got $1.8 million in capital gain.
Yep.
I'm going to have a significant capital gain event.
Right.
dumb that down. When you sell that ranch, if you take that cash, that $1.8 million minus closing cost cash, you're going to pay the government what percentage in capital gain taxes?
Depends on your capital gains rate, but you figure somebody in that position is probably at 20%. And then you have what's a Medicare surcharge, about 4.8%. And so it looks, for me, I try to keep it simple. My example is usually 1 million, so I can do the math easier. Yeah. But you've got that in addition to if there's any depreciation recapture, if there's physical structure, something like that, that kind of contributes to that basis.
So nearly 25% of your gain there. If you sell that $2 million ranch, you're going to pay roughly. This is rough. We're not giving any financial advice. Where's the small print?
Thank you. Yeah, there's the small print.
Can we run small print in the notes, Taylor? The small print is we are not giving financial advice. This is a conversation.
It's education.
And a conversation only. For informative purposes, that $1.8 million gain event right there, they're going to pay around 25% of that in capital gains taxes, right. The Medicare. And so you're looking at $1.8 million being whittled down to $1.4 million.
That's right.
Yeah, around $1.4 million that they're actually going to realize. And then that $1.4 million, that's once you touch the cash. And then that $1.4 million is also, due to inflation, going to lose real buying power every year.
That's right.
At the rate of what's the average inflation rate?
Well, you want to use last year's or you want to use this year's? You be optimistic. Call it 2.5.
Yeah, 2.5.
Call it 3. Yeah,
2.5. I know. But seriously, the years that they've said it's 2.5 to even 5%, it feels like my money's worth.
Oh yeah,
a lot less than that.
That's right.
It feels like I've lost. Just look at the things I eat and consume every day are vehicles, fuel, groceries, clothing, everything. It feels like those things have gone up more than 5% per year.
I agree with that.
So my buying power goes way down. Now let's look at a DST. What is a DST? That stands for
a Delaware Statutory Trust.
Delaware Statutory Trust.
It does not mean they're not all found in Delaware. That's just that's where they originate from. The state of Delaware does.
Yes, sir. Mason, Texas is a long way from Delaware.
Yeah, that's right.
So I have a hard time with that.
That just means the trust is formed in Delaware, and that's where it was. It was went to the IRS, and they in 2004 had a ruling that a trust, which is really the wrapper around this commercial property, is considered like-kind property.
Got it. The Delaware Statutory Trust, the DST, to me, if you look at the tax code, let's pretend like about this much of the tax code is about paying taxes.
Yep.
And about this much of the tax code is how you don't pay taxes.
That's right.
And all of it's legal.
It was in some ways, people will make the case that that's incentivizing by the government what they would like to have, right? So you look at
Correct.
The original 1031
right.
exchange, the incentive was not to stop people from transacting real estate, reduce that capital by paying a tax and then having less capital to invest in the next property. I mean, the great engine of our economy on real estate wealth is through the fact that you have a 1031 that allows you to take your capital and keep making it work. So the comparison to what you described of just paying your taxes and cashing out and then taking 1.4 and going and doing something else with it is to take that full $2 million and put it into a Delaware statutory trust. That's going to be, an Amazon distribution center sometimes, or
fractional interest.
You buy a fractional interest in a Tractor Supply company.
Dollar General, Amazon distribution center.
Yep.
Yeah. Commercial buildings.
Many different sectors in commercial real estate. You really won't find a lot of office space. It's not something that we typically will look to underwrite for different reasons, but there's one or two.
Good thing right now. Vacancies are pretty high.
Candidly, that's part of it is the DST has to fit these constraints of a 1031 exchange. So it makes it kind of unique in terms of which properties are chosen. You can't have a capital call in a DST. Once it's closed, it doesn't take new investors in. All of these things kind of lend towards what's long-term holding. So it'll be a long-term lease on the property if it's a net lease. If it's got financing in it at all, then it's got to be long-term. It can't be refinanced in the lifespan of it. So all of that turns into long-hold property. Usually about 5 years, it'll turn over and be brought to sale. And again, the securities disclaimer, right? No guarantee of return of capital, but it's really built to return the capital with a little bit of growth on top. That's the general idea of it.
Do you have to be an accredited investor to go into a DST? Like an IRS designated creditor investor, which means what?
Yes, you have to be an accredited investor, which typically is net worth of at least $1 million.
At least $1 million minus your primary residence.
Not considering your personal residence. And if it's based off of income, it's a single $200,000 or a married couple $300,000 a year.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what makes it secure. You talk about no capital calls, can't refinance them. We've covered a lot right there. And so I just want to keep it as basic as possible. We've got a real estate transaction.
Yep.
That includes a 1031 exchange, which is a 1031 tax deferred exchange. So I'm selling this asset.
Like you normally would.
Yes, sir. Yep. And I'm purchasing this asset.
Right.
Another real estate asset.
That's exactly it.
Yes. So it doesn't, but there's a lot of misconceptions about the 1031. We work with Greg Learman a lot.
Sure. Great.
Yeah.
Great
Greg's awesome. I've worked with Greg a long time. Do y'all do exchanges also as a QI? Do you act as a QI?
Don't. I just get to work with a group of folks, and Greg's one of the good ones. Yeah.
I've worked with Greg a long time. Hundreds of millions of dollars in 1031 tax deferred exchanges we've done with Greg. And so just to establish a baseline for anybody listening, IRS section 1031 tax deferred exchange is just this. I'm selling a piece of property and I'm buying a piece of property. If I ever touch the cash,
right,
whatever I've gained on that first piece of property is taxable. Okay. So a 1031 is utilizing a qualified intermediary. Call it they're a fiduciary to the transaction, a qualified intermediary. Qualified intermediary holds the money between the sale and the purchase for a period of less than 180 days. They take the money from the first purchase and they fund the second purchase. You as the seller, as the property owner that has the deed to the piece of real estate, you never touch the money. If you touch the money, it's taxed. It's one of the greatest tools we have to stimulate the economy. Because every time a piece of real estate turns over, a painter gets hired, a contractor gets hired, fences get built, electricians get to go to work, landscapers go to work, plumbers go to work, real estate agents get paid, and they go spend money in their local communities. Appraisers get paid, they go spend money. Surveyors get paid, they go spend money. Title companies, attorneys, they get paid, they go spend money. It's one of the greatest tools we have to stimulate the economy. As an individual, as somebody that's held farm and ranch land, Texas farm and ranch land for their whole life, and now you've got an asset because of the growth that our state's seeing, because of the fragmentation that our state's seeing. Now you've got an asset that one day was only worth what you could make with corn plant,
right,
or is only worth what you can make with sheep and goats or cattle or deer, and today is worth amount of money that you can't imagine. Maybe a data center's tried to buy it for the square foot, not by the acre.
Yeah,
a lot of money. But because as you and I make income, we owe a percentage of that income to the IRS. That's just the reality of a democracy that we live in. We live in a free market capital democracy, but we have to pay taxes on every dollar that we make. I think sometimes too much, but that's subjective. That's my opinion. Okay. I wouldn't mind the taxes if I thought they were used always.
I think that's probably
if
the challenge.
If they were used always really well, but we won't deviate there. The IRS Section 1031 exchange allows you to go from one property to the other without touching your cash, because when you touch your money, when you visit your money, it's taxable. And so I'm not touching the money. The money never comes through my hands. It goes from one closing to the next without touching it, so that I'm able to capture that growth. I'm able to start with a property at $200,000, sell that piece of property for $1 million without losing that 25% in taxes. So now my base in this property is $1 million. I let that property appreciate. I sell it at $1.5 million. My base is still $200,000 years ago. Now I'm at $1.5 million in real estate. I sell that one later for $2 million. Now I've got $2 million held in real estate. My base is still $200,000, and the taxes never due until I get out of real estate, or if you die and your estate is under the IRS limit, and you can will that straight into your estate tax-free. Swap till you drop, they say.
That's right. Swap until you drop, right?
Swap
and that's
till you
drop. Where it kind of fits into the estate plan, right? You can just continue to In the case of a DST, usually those are a 5-year cycle, but they're built on different approaches. Sometimes there'll be a shorter term, 3, sometimes 7. Sometimes if we're talking about something that's replacing debt in a 1031 exchange, it might be a longer hold, something around 20 years. So there's a lot of different applications for it. But with a DST, you're simply using that security, that fractional ownership of that property as like kind. So it's the property that you replace in the 1031.
Yeah, and if you put that into what you hope to be an income producing asset long term, produces cash flow long term, you hope it does, it should. It's got a track record of doing that, right? Yeah. You may never exit that. Most people, the plan is for most people, they never. I like to relate it this way because, and I've got some questions I want to ask you that are actually from generational landowners.
Yeah, that's right.
Because these will be questions that they've asked and questions that they'll relate to. But
yeah, let's go. Yeah.
As a business guy, I think of a DST basically as a real estate mutual fund. I don't ever plan to sell it.
Right.
I don't ever plan to diminish my mutual fund down to zero because then it loses all of its ability to build generational wealth for my family.
Yeah, and what we specifically do with Trusted Capital Partners is when we sit down with folks, we're going to usually diversify them. So one of the things we want to do to address any risk associated with one particular DST is get them into 2 or 3 different non-correlated sectors, 2 or 3 different ones, but we sit down and figure out what's your investment objective, what's your horizon, is this part of the estate plan, and build them what looks like what you might call a mutual fund, or maybe in bigger cases, a small slice of a family office of real estate, right? That's got different performance parameters for each one, but you could build something that's pretty durable.
Yes, sir. Got it. Let's run through some of these questions, Jeff.
Yeah.
And I think that'll stimulate some other conversation for us. But I want to make sure we get these questions asked because people did ask them of us. Here's the first one. I've owned dirt my whole life. If I sell my ranch and move into a DST, what do I actually own?
Yeah, you own a fractional interest in whatever that property is that the DST is wrapped around.
Okay.
So you're technically a beneficiary of the trust. So you have a beneficial interest. I'll give you the simplest example I've got. At a DST that was a tractor supply store in east of Dallas. And it was a single store that comprised that DST, because sometimes you can have multiple properties. But I had a client who was transitioning, and they were actually from the north side of Dallas, but they had kind of said, hey, if we're gonna choose DSTs, we'd like to stay in Texas. And so they had a preference for what's the engine of Texas, what did they know, and to be physically proximate to it. We actually went out and looked at that store.
No kidding.
And so you can do that. The sponsors of the DSTs will host a client. I think one of the things that probably is scary about the industry is is it just a mutual fund? Is it just paper? Is it something like that? Or is it a physical property? The sponsors are really transparent about the actual business financials. They disclose everything, but they'll actually host a client to go look at that property and walk the ground and talk to the folks running it and have an interactive relationship with them.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
To me, that gives me a lot of comfort in the product. If I can go see it, touch it, feel it. I believe in Texas. I'm a Texas guy. Yep. There's other states I wouldn't invest in commercial real estate because I think the state's politics are probably trending them downward.
I get that
on
preference.
Business.
I get that preference. And so I work with probably 40 or 50 sponsors across the nation are DST sponsors. They're typically larger real estate firms that have multiple divisions that do different things. Sometimes it's just a firm that solely does DSTs. But from there, I have a broker dealer in St. Louis, Saxony Securities, who does the first work of selecting which sponsors and which projects they are willing to underwrite to put on the platform that I can choose from. So I basically have this agnostic approach to look at what's the best available project for a client, but then more importantly, what are they looking for? What are their preferences? And how do we find something that fits that?
Got it. Do I have property management responsibilies?
You do not.
I've personally owned residential rentals.
Yeah.
I've personally owned single family rentals. I've personally owned farm and ranch properties that are rented.
taxes.
Being a landlord is one of my least favorite things
toilets,
in the world.
Tractors, trash, right? All of that. That's probably the biggest turn. That's what you're going to step away from. So the big challenge for DSTs for a lot of folks is, I own it, I control it, and you're moving into a passive position.
Yeah.
And some folks really have trouble with like, man, I used to control all of that. And the answer is, yes, you did. You're now passive, but you've got national sponsors who, by profession, they do it for a business and they're good at it.
Yeah.
And so you move into that passive position. You're not dealing with that. It's kind of like a return on time.
Yeah.
Folks talk about
I had the same conversation with my in-laws last week. They've got, they farm ranch in like Lampasas and San Saba counties. And the old farmhouse where my wife's grandmother lived is still on the property and they're renting it out. And being a landlord's miserable.
Yep.
I think some people love it. Some people
attest.
love property management, some people love it. I think if most people experienced being a landlord without a good property manager, they would have a similar opinion. DST is basically being a landlord with a good property manager, being a fractional landlord with a good property manager.
That's right.
Yeah. I think I'm trying to make it where it computes.
Yeah.
I'm trying to explain the DST where it does make sense to somebody that's in their 60s and 70s and they're selling a ranch and they want to stay in real estate. They want the favorable tax treatment, but they just don't understand.
Sure.
Because they haven't done it.
I think there's three things about it really that, come through. One is like, okay, I've got an option to deal with capital gains taxes so I can address and do this through a 1031 and have capital to work with. I can acquire a fractional interest in a property and I can set those parameters based off of what's available. So it could be geographically preferenced. It could be something that they just are comfortable with because maybe they did have a rent house or they know property management, or maybe they've had net lease properties in the past, so they're kind of familiar with that space. Whatever that preference is, they can acquire that and include that in how we choose a property. It's an investment that's built on cash flow most of the time. Some are built to do other things. But when we talk about what's predictable cash flow, it's an established return. So the program will say, here's all the financials. You can look through those, verify them, but we're going to pay a certain distribution monthly. And so that's ordinary income. That's where that cash flow comes from. And the quality of it is that firm, who's renting that net lease property, or what's the structure and what's behind the income. And then there's potential for capital growth when it's brought to sale. And so when you've got that idea, you can kind of just look through what's available and figure out, is this a good fit? But at the end of the day, you move into a passive position where you are, you're monitoring what goes on to the greatest degree you would like to, of how that thing is performing. And so that's kind of the trade, right? It's moving into the what folks like to call mailbox money, but it's still got a great degree of involvement to whatever amount somebody wants to be involved.
I know you're not a CPA.
I get to talk to a lot of them.
Yeah, another small print disclaimer. Jeff's not a CPA. What about cost segregation and depreciation? That's one of the beautiful things. That honestly is the thing that makes it worth being a landlord to me.
Yes.
Is because if I'm in single family, multifamily, commercial, industrial, rental type of real estate, net lease stuff, I can capture that depreciation, cost segregation. It's in our industry, it's one of the best things I can do to reduce the amount of income taxes that I pay. And so the cash flow is not always great, especially in a college town like this. The cash flow is not great on single family rentals. It's not great on commercial rentals. But when you look at the overall strategy, it gets to be attractive and almost worth being a landlord. Yeah. And if I go into a DST, do I receive that same treatment on my taxes?
You do. So you get what's called a tax equivalent yield, and it does depend on the type of DST.
Okay.
Most DSTs are going to be new or like new because you don't have a capital call associated with a DST. That's not something that's allowed.
You would need a capital call to go renovate a building or something like that.
You're not going to find a value add property or something like that where they're going to come back and say, hey, we need additional.
Hey, if we buy it here, we might make this much money. That's not what you're doing.
That's really not the construct. But with multifamily, which is a large portion of the DST inventory, you're going to have super cost segregation and depreciation, right? So they're very smart about that. That comes back to the individual at the same percentage of ownership. So you do get some tax equivalent yield.
That's good.
And if it happens to be one where there's leverage, right? So if there's debt on the DST, you also get the benefit of that interest expense. So usually folks who are in an all cash position, they like to stay all cash. That's usually how we work that. But if somebody has debt on a property and they're in a 1031 exchange, that's one of the things that DSTs do really well. It moves debt from personal recourse to non-recourse. So if it's a personal note on that property, it is now off of their personal debt and it becomes the debt of the trust. A lot of times we're working with folks who have a property that's got a note on it. And there's two ways you can get to pay taxes, right? One is on capital gains. The other's on boot from not replacing that debt.
Yes.
And so
on a 1031 exchange, if I sell, let's go back to that same $10 million ranch.
Sure.
That we probably have to go to a different ranch because that one they inherited at a $200,000 valuation. Let's go to a more common situation. Somebody bought a ranch for $1 million in 2020 when everybody wanted one.
Yep.
Okay. And they bought it at 4% interest, and now their interest rate is adjusted up to 7%. They're not so much sure they like it, and they're in construction. The construction market's kind of down, but they want to stay in it. But they do have some debt. This person's got in this $1 million place, they've got $500,000 in debt. And so on a IRS Section 1031 tax-deferred exchange, you have to reinvest the principal, the debt, and the gain, all of it. Yep. Whatever you keep back is taxable.
That's correct.
That's right. So in a DST, do I also reinvest the debt? Because now I'm putting debt into somebody else's fund. That seems weird.
Yeah, so you do match the debt. I mean, it's one of the things DSTs do really well because you can invest as long as it's over $100,000. We'll basically do the calculation of what's the exact amount of equity to go into a leveraged or a debt writing DST to match that amount so that somebody is not going to pay taxes on it. Sometimes they want to invest more than that and they're going to pick up some additional debt, but it's to specifically replace that so that there's not a tax implication.
I'm taking a lot of notes for myself over here.
That's good. We also have DSTs that specifically eat debt. That's a pretty informal term, but you have a DST that's non-standard. It doesn't pay a distribution, but it is going to be loan to value at a higher percentage, like 60 to 80%. So with a small amount of equity, you're going to be able to replace a larger amount of debt. And so when we build these, segregated or segmented portfolios, you can basically address all the debt with a little bit of equity. And now I've got remaining capital that I can go and invest in something else, whether it's an all cash DST or if somebody's going to do a fee simple acquisition. Probably one of the things about 1031 exchanges is it doesn't have to all be one for one. You can cash out a portion and pay a portion of on taxes on a portion of it.
That's what I was about to ask.
You can. A lot of times I will provide a DST to somebody who's got a land acquisition and they're going big, but it just turns out to be a little bit smaller and they've got some leftover change, so anything over $100,000, somebody's like, well, why would I just pay taxes on that? Or why don't I get some cash distribution off of that? And so a lot of times I'll just fill the gap with a DST because that can easily be done to the penny. So yeah, there's a lot of good applications, a lot of fun stuff we get to do. A lot of times folks will be in a 1031 exchange and they lose the acquiring property that they thought they were going to get, but they really don't want the capital gains. It depends on how close you are to day 45 and that identification window. That we call it a 911 1031. Yeah. But the other thing you can do is use that to basically address 1033 exchanges. Sometimes we've got, just a portion of land that somebody's got to turn over, and they're like, okay, what are we going to do with these
1033 is condemnation, eminent domain, transmission line comes through. I was not wanting the income, didn't expect to get the income, but if I take the income, it's taxable. Pipeline comes through, highway right of way. It's not just a fee simple sale. It's there's condemnation or imminent domain.
Weather hazard, right? If it's destruction.
Sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, weather hazard. You get a longer timeline.
That's right.
To go reinvest those funds, and that's the 1033.
Yep.
Yeah, so you can take those in a DST. I think I'm going to have to do another interview to cover that. I want to go back to our mock-up seller here. A lot of our sellers are traditional landowners. They've owned farm ranch land sometimes for generations. And for whatever reason, I think the truth is there's debt, divorce, health issues. All those are reasons that people sell. But just generationally, you end up with 13 grandkids. And how are 13 grandkids going to get along managing this ranch that requires a few $1,000s a month in operating costs? Then you got property taxes and maintenance and upkeep. And, between 13 of them, there's not enough weekends in hunting season to all of them use it. And so who gets to use it? So they end up just saying, what the best thing to do is wind this up and sell it. There's a couple of tools there, but let's assume that they're going to go sell that piece of property. A lot of those traditional sellers have never had any significant cash. Land rich, cash poor. You've heard it.
That's it.
So a lot of our sellers have never had significant cash. They've been Schedule F income, farm and ranch income predominantly their whole life. And now they have a chance.
Yeah.
They have a chance to have $1 million, $2, $3, $5 million. And a DST sounds attractive. Jeff, I hear what you're saying. I can give you my money and I can make investment, but you don't understand. I've never had a lot of it.
Yep.
I've always wanted to have $1 million in the bank. So what does that seller do? Can they invest a percentage of it into the DST and keep $1 million back? What do they do?
This episode is brought to you by the Mock Ranches Real Estate Group. At Mock Ranches, we specialize in representing buyers and sellers of farms, ranches, and recreational land across the state of Texas. Our team sold over $1.25 billion of Texas land, and we focus on helping landowners make smart decisions about their most valuable assets. If you're thinking about buying or selling, or simply want to understand the land markets better, get a hold of us at mockranches.com. Mock Ranches, Texas land represented right.
Yeah, so I had a client that I got to work on a deal with, Laney Rust. He was up in western Nebraska, was coming to Texas. He was going from big to small. And so he basically purchased a smaller acreage for a cow-calf operation. We took a portion of his funds, proceeds from the bigger place, and put it into a DST portfolio. And specifically, he was going to take the cash flow from that to get his cattle operations running, right? And then and that was going to provide some additional living income. Mm-hmm. But as he was acquiring that property, there was adjacent land that he wanted to pick up. He had an interest in, and so he was making offers on it. He was getting close to the 45-day window for his identification of properties in the 1031 exchange. So we basically created backup DSTs in case he was not able to acquire those lands. And so the idea was, if he doesn't get the adjacent land that he wants, he'll just put it in a DST. When that thing matures, he'll then have that capital to come back out and look at being able to.
How long do you have to stay in the DST?
For the life of that individual property. So,
really?
Yeah, they're going to tell you how long.
It's not very liquid at all.
It is the definition of illiquid. So you cannot just say, "Hey, I want out," and pull. You've got to ride it all the way through it, going back to sale, and the sponsor is going to do that to maximize the amount of capital growth. Right?
Yes.
They want to get the best bite at the apple on that return, but they'll tell you by construct.
You know that up front. I'm going into this DST and this is a 5-year ride or a 10-year hold.
It's a disclosure, right? Yeah. So we make sure that the clients understand it, and they have different time parameters by what is the deal, right? There's a sponsor who's got a particular DST offering, and they want to turn that around between 3 to 5 years. There's somebody who's, is like, this is middle of the road. We're going to hold this for 5 years. Some are going to tell you it's going to be longer, around 7. If it's one of those, debt eating ones where it's just amortizing, it's going to be a long hold. But that's all in, what are you picking?
So after, let's take the 3 to 5 year DST.
Yeah.
I take my money, my $3 million. I sell the ranch.
Yeah.
For the next 3 to 5 years. This is a realistic scenario. I've got this happening right now.
Okay.
Guy bought a ranch, 4 hours from home. Now he's got little kids.
Yeah.
Kids do what? They've got gymnastics and soccer and 4-H and baseball and basketball and school and all the things.
Goes back to first principles.
Yep. Yeah. It's hard to use a ranch that's 4 hours away.
Yeah.
When you have little kids. And so there's a 12-year life. There's a 12-year span right there in your life that you're really busy. And then you become an empty nester and you spend all your time at the ranch. But that's not where he's at. So let's say that this gentleman wants to sell that ranch, go into a DST for 5 years. Kids get out of school. He wants to buy another ranch in 5 years. So he'll sell the ranch, exchange in the DST. That DST matures in 5 years. They sell it. Then he exchanges out of the DST into another ranch.
It's another 1031 exchange, right? So
Easy.
you could, and that's where we get into what's the objective of the investor, right? Do you want to stay concentrated so they can have all that capital mature at once, or are they not looking at that timeline and they're good with diversification? So, but absolutely, every time that happens, it's a 1031 exchange. There's also something called a 721 exchange. It's an UPREIT. So for people who want to start using that capital, they want to start withdrawing it portionally, you can actually go from a DST into a REIT. It's called an UPREIT through a 721 exchange.
Okay.
And sometimes that's a solution that folks are looking for.
What's the risk in a DST? Well, I still keep going back to this scenario because I know this is a question.
We're walking along.
Yeah, I know this is a question I'm going to get. I sell the $3 million ranch.
Yeah.
I send $2 million to the DST. I've never had $1 million cash. So this specific seller, they sell the $3 million ranch. They put $2 million into the DST.
Yeah.
That $2 million goes there. That's going to hopefully produce cash flow. They keep $1 million back. They're going to pay 25% roughly on that $1 million. They're going to end up actually with $750,000. And now it maybe gives them a cushion, gives them a pad. They've never had enough money to do the things they want to do and be comfortable. And they've worked their whole life and they deserve to be comfortable. So I'm all good with that. What happens when the 750 runs out and now they have a major life event?
Yeah.
Somebody gets cancer.
Right.
Death, divorce hits.
Yep.
We need to go access that $2 million that's tied up into the DST, and that DST is not matured.
Yeah. So it gets into really why this is a securities industry kind of approach. I have to go through suitability with the client and talk about, what's your total net wealth? Where does this fit in? And what are your liquidity needs, right? But at the same time, we build that portfolio. And especially if we're going to diversify it into some different parts, we'll look at opportunities for liquidity. In other words, opportunities where one of those DSTs is going to mature earlier than others. The cash flow that's coming off of it becomes a cash flow analysis. Okay, this is, 3 DSTs and a $1 million, or in your example, a $2 million position. What's the cash flow coming off of that? And how does that support what is your income and what are your needs? And if you do have that existential event where that happens, we have to be able to address that, and they have to acknowledge, like, okay, we this is what we would do in this circumstance.
Got it.
Yep.
Got it. And they can work with other financial planners, insurance coverage, disability, life insurance, financial planners. They can take that income, I'm assuming that cash off the DST, put that into a Roth or some kind of other financial vehicle, defer taxable gain there.
Yeah. The cash flow becomes fun. This becomes part of what makes my job interesting, because you really get to collaborate with folks, their CPA, their lawyer, or tell them, hey, it's probably time to go find one, right?
A lot of them have not had one.
And
a lot of them have had a small town CPA, and I don't mean this in any disrespect, but I just see it so often. They've had a small town CPA that is not progressive and forward thinking.
Yeah.
And they don't have a good attorney at all.
Yep. So
it's pretty costly. When they start to wind up their land estate, it gets to be very costly.
Yeah, it's probably one of the reasons why I work with Landwise Partners, right? A good group of subject matter experts and guys who are really focused on 2050 food security, but you just get to be in the room with some super experts who know how to skin cats different ways. But I get to collaborate with those, whatever team comes to the table and talk about like, what are we really trying to accomplish here and what are the needs for the individuals? So if that cash flow is going into, in one case, a 1033 exchange that was unexpected and our clients are basically taking that cash flow and they're going to use it to do education for nieces and nephews.
Oh, cool.
So working through,
That's great.
Through, basically using that
they're going
cash
to fund the 529 plan.
They're going to fund 529
They're going to fund the
exactly
529 plan with that cash flow. That's awesome.
Yep. And so
talk about generational blessing.
Yep. And then philanthropic stuff, or whether it is, hey, this is fundamentally what we are living on, in which case that becomes a very different question about how do we look at risk, how do we look at liquidity opportunities and that sort of thing along the way. Yeah.
Where does the risk lie in a DST?
It really lies in, let's use the example of a net lease property like that Tractor Supply company that I referred to, right? The quality of the income is coming from the lease that Tractor Supply has with the trust. So they're a Moody's bond rated, publicly traded company. They pay their lease before they pay their dividends on their Class A stock. The contracts, and one of the things we look at, the leases are written very tight to where there's not an easy out for them to just say, hey, the market went down or we don't like this place, we're out. They're going to be bound into paying that lease for the duration. Usually it's like 10 and 15-year leases with extension opportunities. So longer than the DST is going to be held. But it would take them going into Chapter 11 in order for them to not pay what is effectively the lease that turns into the distribution. Yeah. That can technically happen, right? I mean, that is the risk, is it can go upside down, but we really look hard at the quality of the company that's paying the money. And so that's what you have as a downside. And even on that downside, you still own a property. And in some cases, there have been a DST where a sponsor said, we actually are not in the right spot. We're going to move from there and have vacated a lease, but they're continuing to pay it. Yeah. Amazon did that when they did a little bit of overbuild on warehouses. They just continue to pay the lease on those warehouses. They're back in them now, or if they've sold them and other people have come in, that's just additional income on top of what is the lease continuing to be paid. Right. Which sounds luxurious to me and you, right? Yeah. Guys like me and you were like, how could I pay for an empty store? But at the big corporate level, that is something that they do.
Yeah, got it. Who is it not for? Here's why I asked that question. I think we earn the most trust with our clients when we advise them on what not to do. Yeah. So I'm pump the brakes here.
Yeah.
So we don't look like salesmen all the time, you know? So who is a DST not for?
Somebody who cannot relinquish control and they know they're going to need to pull that money out, right? Yeah. They know that they cannot go through the illiquid period of it's going to be doing what it's doing for 5 years. I know I'm going to need that money in 2. That's who it's not for. And it is a bit of a transition for somebody who's been in ownership and control. It's hard sometimes for them to relinquish that and just go into the passenger seat, But that's more behavioral, right? That's more like, okay, let's talk about what's important to you. I think this is where I can sometimes help in terms of leading and coaching and mentoring and advising folks is, what's your return on time? What are the things you want to be focused on? If you want to go and manage a property or you really want to squeeze, because it's just personally satisfying to squeeze, that 2 or 3 extra percentage points of return out of it because you could manage it yourself and keep that cost. That's good. That's what you do. But there's other things
vehicles for that too.
But if you want time with the kids between 1 and 12, or maybe when you're the grandparent and you're looking at grandkids, can you move into that seat, take some mailbox money and be passive and go? I probably sound salesy and going to the other side, but it's pretty clear. It's an option. It's not for everybody. And the ones it's not for are those who I think really want to put it in and pull it back out immediately, mainly because they're just not right. They missed that one property they were looking for, but they're still actively looking and they think they're going to pull the trigger in the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah.
That's not a DST solution.
Can you set a fund manager up, a DST fund manager up? Like, let's say I'm a grandparent. Say I have a grandparent, I got a half a dozen grandkids. I want the ranch to support them, and I want the ranch to bless them for a lot of years.
Yes.
30 years,
Right.
40 years. They don't need the cash today out of that, because history would suggest that cash will not last very long. Right. If I give them the cash, it's a chance it ruins them, or they just waste it. And so is there a way to set the DST up where generationally it is there? And when this fund matures, it automatically goes into a next one. Do y'all handle that?
We do.
Yeah.
So, but not in terms of financial planning, right? So we get some great sponsor, some great partners for referring for investment advising with where does that cash flow go to then get to work in different ways if they're not using it for ordinary living. But it absolutely fits inside of a trust, whatever the structure that the family has.
Got it.
And I will tell you on the big end, on the biggest big end, like when you get past what I do on the retail side, which can easily, accommodate $20 to $40 million of portfolio composition, there's the construction of a DST where a lawyer will come in and build the trust around what is the family properties. And there's different reasons for that in applications. That's a different conversation. When I start to get with larger amounts of equity that are in play, we start bringing in some different folks who can do different things. But yeah, it absolutely fits in the bigger scheme of things for family planning.
I want to circle back, Jeff, to the landowner you were talking about using DSTs as a backup exchange.
Right. Yeah. So this client had used DSTs as a portion of his transaction, deliberately constructing that to get cash flow.
Yeah.
And so that was part of his holdings.
Half of his land sale, it went back into a ranch, took the other half into DSTs.
Yep. And then he was trying to acquire additional adjacent land that he didn't know if he was going to get it or not. He was in his 45-day window, right? That closes in that exchange. You get 180 days, but at day 45, you have to identify your options. We use something that's called the 200% rule. So there's different rules apply with 1031 exchanges, but we identified DSTs as backup in case he didn't acquire those land. And so in one case, he acquired the additional acreage. He was able to do it. In one case, he never got a response, and we just basically exercised the DST within 180 days. And so, it's just a great way when it's kind of that 911, 1031 thing, right? Somebody loses their property. You can always have a DST as a backup with a 200% rule if you don't think you're going to be successful, but you're trying to figure out, what are my options?
Yeah, if you're not working with a land broker that understands these things right here, you need to be.
That's right.
If you're not working with a CPA that understands this is Major League Baseball when it comes to tax strategy for landowners.
Yep.
So the 200% rule is if I'm selling that same $1 million ranch, I can declare inside my 45-day window for a 1031 exchange from the day that I sell my $1 million piece of property, I can go declare it. I don't have to contract them, but I can identify or declare up to $2 million worth of replacement property.
That's correct.
Yeah, because I may not close it all.
That's right.
I may say, I would like to buy Jeff's place, but I don't know if I'm going to get Jeff's place. If I can't get Jeff's, I'll buy Taylor's. So I can declare both and then move forward into offering to contract on Jeff's. If I don't get Jeff's, I can get Taylor's. But if I don't get Taylor's, and I don't declare inside my 45-day window, here comes the tax bill.
That's correct.
The money comes to me. Congratulations.
Yep.
You're going to get your income taxes. You're not going to like them. So what you're saying is use the DST as a backup. If I've got a specific piece of property that I want to purchase and exercise a 1031, but if for some reason that doesn't happen, I can declare DSTs as a backup to ensure that I'm not having to pay that capital gain tax.
Yeah, and we found a lot of application for that when interest rates were as onerous. They've come down a little bit, but somebody's not sure they're going to get the financing that they want, or that's just, any one of those things that are factors that may not close a deal. A lot of times.
Appraisals. I mean, there was a bunch of places didn't appraise.
Sure.
Yeah, and if the buyer didn't have the cash to put down,
Yep.
To combine. In 2022 and 2023, Jeff, when the market was really shifting, we had around $160 million of contracts at title, at escrow, terminated.
That's painful.
Yes. In about an 18-month period there, we had $160 million in contracts terminated at escrow.
Yeah.
And so this would have been a really nice tool for some of those people.
Yeah. I mean, it's a tool that fits for certain things really, really well. So whether it is initially helping an agent or broker explain to their client, I know that you're eventually going to sell this land. I think every agent's probably got, clients that they have long-term relationships with, and they're just trying to help them get over that hump of, it's okay for us. We've got a solution. This is the way that works. That's what DSTs, I think, help with. And then some of the more advanced applications when it comes to debt or replacement or just a part of a 1031 exchange.
Give me 3 downsides that somebody can write down.
Oh, yeah.
To a DST. They're listening to this. They're in their car.
Yeah.
They're going to jot a note down at their desk.
Yeah.
Give me 3 downsides to a DST.
Easy. It's cost and fees. It is illiquidity, and it's control. And there's a perspective on each one of those 3.
Run me through them.
Sure. Costs and fees are typically around 10% for a DST, but there is context to that, right? So that includes the commission I make. It's the underwriting cost, everything like that. But if you have $1 million that goes into a DST, the distributions are paid on $1 million, but only 90 cents on the dollar, for example, is maybe going into the physical property. So you're looking for the growth of capital that comes from that value property being held to get back up to 100% and a little bit of growth on top of it. That's the real onerous point for the cost and fees. You got to compare it against, do you want to pay your capital gains taxes, right? So
yes, sir.
And we help people do that math. We'll sit down and say, look, what would your capital gains tax be? And this is what you have the potential to put to work if you do a DST. The cost can kind of be transparent, but it's fully disclosed. And it's one of the things we underwrite is if somebody's got too much cost built into there, then they're making that capital work even harder to appreciate the property. That's the way we analyze for success.
The second downside you listed was illiquidity.
Yeah.
Lack of liquidity.
A DST is the definition of illiquidity from a security standpoint. Liquidity comes from being able to go to the stock market and cash out.
Draw it out tomorrow.
Take it out tomorrow, right? And so in some sense, folks are always a bit illiquid with real estate property because you can't sell it tomorrow, but you can choose to go sell it. So the illiquidity is you're going to put it into the program, and the national sponsor is going to determine when to sell it. They're going to do it based off of that idea, that concept that they said this is a 3-year, 5, or a 7, but they're going to hold for the best market timing. They've got skin in the game, and they want to maximize that return. And so you're not going to be able to pull that capital out unless you've done a couple of things. One, we'll build a portfolio that has those opportunities for liquidity earlier or later, depending on what somebody wants. There's also some different options when you do have a transaction that you can take a bit of that cash out, or you can have what's called a 721 exchange into a REIT. And that UPREIT, that's a whole different topic, but a good one, allows you to then dip into the capital and pull it out portionally, but you're paying capital gains as you go.
I found that investors that feel the need to touch their cash
are
not always the most successful investors.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Liquidity being in its purest form is cash. Just cash. I can spend it, touch it, burn it, give it, whatever I want to do with it. But cash loses money every day.
There's a trend.
Cash loses value every day. And then on the polar opposite end of that, you've got the DST, very illiquid.
Yeah, this is probably the paradigm shift. And it kind of goes with the last one, which is control. But it is moving into patient capital. When you talk to folks who are in family offices and bigger equity positions, right? A lot of times it's about being patient. It's not about looking at the market for the next 6 months or even for a year. In fact, you could say the advantage of illiquidity is that you have the potential to tunnel through whatever the next turn on the corner is, because nobody can project all the way out 5 years, right? Everybody thinks there's a little bit of recession lurking around the corner right now, but DST built right is going to do what it's going to do through that period of time and let that capital do the work it needs to do.
These legacies that people hold in the land, it wasn't built overnight. When we talk about the legacy in the land, we're not talking about flipping ranches.
Right.
So when you think about a DST being patient capital, for you and I, as we advise our clients, man, I think it's all in the messaging and all in the communication to that client.
That's right.
Because they're going from a very patient asset to another very patient asset. It's just a very different asset.
It is. And it requires understanding it, which is a large part of what we do. I spend my day teaching people how to count to 1031 and spell DST. But it's enjoyable because you get to meet great folks along the way, right? That's the relationships that go with it.
All right, we'll wrap up with this. What are you reading, Jeff?
The Bible.
Okay.
Pretty much in there every day. In fact, I've got a great book that a friend gave me that's just a little personal worship guide by a guy named Jay Gibson called Be Thou My Vision. And it's a lot like the liturgy if you're in that flavor of denomination, but it's for personal worship. And it's just been really rich. My wife and I have been doing it together some. I've got a stack of books that I'm halfway through, but because I go up to Montana to Patrol Base Abate, I'm trying to finish out again Steve Ambrose's Undaunted Courage on the Lewis and Clark expedition.
Yeah,
that's a rerun.
That's awesome. Who are you leading?
I'm leading a couple of guys that have come and joined my firm. And this is a big transition for me, right? I've gone from lots of Marines, doing lots of things to learning how to lead in the business environment. And it's really, really rewarding. It's not easy.
No, it's not.
I will tell you.
Business would be really easy if it wasn't for the people.
Well, we've got a whole nother podcast that we could do because I want to ask you about your transition early on when you decided to not just be Casey taking care of Casey, but Casey taking care of other people in business. Because I've had this sweet period for me after 30 years of leading Marines where I was, able to solo take a different walk. I chose a different path when I left the Marine Corps and transitioned. And I've had my own business for a couple of years, but now bringing guys on and girls and want to grow this organization because there's a lot of good work to do with taking care of people who are making the transition from real estate into DSTs, as well as opportunity zones and capital gains and selling businesses. But it is different to lead at this level in this way. So yeah. I want to pick your brain.
We need to do that.
Yeah.
What are you learning?
Learning to be patient. Learning that
it's a good attribute.
Yeah, that's right. And it's learned for me.
Me too.
I'm learning every day. I have so much in terms of understanding different industries and economies, certainly the data center component and where that fits into national security. I've got a national security lens that I had for 30 years. I got a master's degree in all of that aspect of who we are as a nation. But when you look at our economy as it relates to national security, and you look at what we're up against and what we have the opportunity, it's really opportunities in many cases, right?
Yeah.
To get right, but we got to get it right. It's not a foregone conclusion. That's what I'm learning about every day, man. And it's powerful. It's deep.
That's good. Where are you earning? That's the last one.
I'm earning with my family. I've got 3 adult sons. And we're just blessed that they're all out doing what they do. The youngest one graduated last year and he's got a job and he's in his passion place. The other one's a Marine officer. The other one works in IT for the federal government for the Marine Corps. And so just being able to earn time with them, that's like, I don't get to dictate that, they're choosing to come and be around. And so
good stuff.
I think I'm earning rewards of not perfect parenting for sure, but love, it's the reward of loving and having a relationship that made it all the way through to adulthood. I'm earning right now in terms of just this space, right? This DST space is really for me, it's a gift but it's a solution for a lot of folks who are turning over massive amounts of wealth, and they're looking for a place to be smart about it. And so I'm getting the benefit from that, but also share it with other folks. So
I love it.
Yeah.
We'll put links to all your stuff in the show notes and descriptions. We'll send this out to our folks. How can people connect with you quickly, follow you?
Yeah, trustedcapitalpartners.com. We've got a website. I'm probably more active on LinkedIn than I am on Facebook, but we're there too. Just hit us on the website, and we'd love to just have a conversation, a cup of coffee. That's the way we kind of do it.
Love it. You're in the Marine Corps for 30, how many years?
30.
How long you been a believer in Jesus?
Since I was a young teenager. Yeah.
Awesome. Life worth living, buddy.
That's it, man.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed the time.
That wraps us up. I appreciate you listening to the Landowner Insider. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to follow the show, leave us a review, and share it with another Texas landowner. For more insights, listings, and resources for Texas landowners, visit mockranches.com. Till next time, I'm Casey Mock, your host. This has been the Landowner Insider. Go get 'em.